Welcome in, everyone. UGA Football Live with JC Shelton. I'm solo today. Artie Lynch could not make it. He's actually preparing to moderate the presidential debate on September 10th, so he couldn't be here today, unfortunately, to recap this game. This is the first time we've done it here on this show, and I'm really excited about it. So I wasn't able to be in Atlanta today at Mercedes-Benz for the Georgia-Clemson game because of my national coverage for Athlon Sports. So I wanted to do this. I mean, it was one of the benefits from being at home. If you notice, the TV behind me is no longer there. It's actually in the war room in the living room as one of my game TVs. So right now we're going to break down this game and just give you some notes and kind of rehash what went down. So both Artie and I, Arthur Lynch, former Georgia tight end, on this week's show called Georgia to win it. We called Georgia to cover. I think Artie was 37-20. Mine was 30-13. The game started kind of how we thought it was early. You know, it's a game between two really, really physical teams. I think Clemson and that defensive front really, maybe it was the adrenaline, maybe it was just that talent. I think it both combined really, and they played really, really well up front against a really, really good Georgia offensive line, right? We talked about that. We talked about them having the ability to really stop Georgia's run. We thought that was going to happen. Now, later in the game, it turned out, right, Georgia wore them down. Right. And you do that with no help from Clemson's offense. I mean, that Clemson defense, you get some help for that offense, and I think there'll be a really good team. I don't think this game for them is a barometer for the rest of their season. I think, with the struggles for FSU and that defensive front, I mean, compare the two teams, Florida State's defensive front and that defense to Clemson's. I think Clemson has a clear advantage there. They just need some more help from Klubnik. And I think eventually he will reach that. They need some help out wide. But Georgia really took advantage, right? So 6-0 in the first half. I saw you Georgia fans calling out Mike Bobo. I saw it. We saw it. And I get it. I completely get it. Georgia came in with a plan of still running the ball inside, right? And that was without Trevor and Etienne because of the suspension, right? It was without Roderick Robinson because of the toe injury, and he underwent surgery in fall camp. So we don't know when he's going to get back. So it was up to Branson Robinson, who's coming off a season-ending injury a year ago, right? It's his first game back. I think he had like 60 carries as a true freshman. So that's most experience right there. And he had Cass Jones, a former walk-on. He's a junior. And Nate Frazier, a true freshman. Now, we heard the buzzing, a lot of buzz out of camp that Nate Frazier, one of the top running backs in the class, he didn't get to Georgia until the summer, right? So we really didn't know too much about him. It was just a buzz in camp. He's playing really well, right? He's making that starting defense look a little less aggressive in practice because they really can't touch the man. He's fast. He ran like a 10.5 100 meter, which if you don't know what I'm talking about there is really, really quick. Just leave it at that. He comes in and really is a spark for Georgia, especially in the second half, right? Nothing was really worked in that first half as far as for Georgia in the run game, right? But they kept at it. And you have to as a play caller, and that's where the Mike Bobo criticisms came in. I noticed on Twitter he was kind of sticking with it and not really expanding that game plan as, Clemson really loaded the box and challenged Georgia receivers as well. It was really interesting from that standpoint because you looked at it and you said, okay, I do want to stick with a run, but it's not working, right? And you go into that half and you're like, okay, what's Georgia going to do differently here? And I think it was clear in the second, outside runs, right? Get the ball outside quick to the receivers and Dylan Bell and Dom Lovett. Cass Jones lined up and called a good one, made a move to get 9 yards in the second half as well and set up a Georgia scoring drive. I think that was the focus in the second, and I think it was a really, really good move by that Georgia staff and Mike Bobo. You can compare both halves. I think, a lot of Georgia fans will be like, oh, that's a great half of football, great play calling, balance, get the ball into people's hands, let Carson Beck work, let Nate Frazier get outside and make that speed really make a difference. But that first half, you just put that as a whole. Let's say I give you that first half and say this is what Georgia did all game. You'd have been like, wow, we need to work on whatever we're doing offensively as far as play calling. Now, it's the whole body of work, right? That's why I think Mike Bobo did get a job in that offensive staff. But I think really the main thing for me here, and we'll talk about this game, we'll talk it through. The defensive battle early, I think in part of this is why Mike Bobo and that staff kind of kept with that first half game plan and really try to pound the ball and wear them out for the second half, is because you had a defense that was playing very, very well. This Georgia defense, what questions did we have entering the game, right? Think about that. Defensive line, right? Because last year they were not at stuff. They averaged like allowing 30 more yards than they did the 2 years prior on the ground, right? So we thought, okay, you have 2 starters coming back, and Warren Brinson is your Stackhouse. You look at the edges, you had Chaz coming back and Michael. You're like, these guys need to step up, right? Because that's one thing that Georgia can do well. They love to stop the run, and then they can play soft coverage in the back end and really force you into bad situations as a quarterback, right? Get pressure before. Don't have to send another one. Gives you better chances in the secondary. And Georgia did that, and they stopped the run. Now, this team coming in, Clemson, Phil Maffa's no joke. And you saw glimpses of that today when him running through really, really good tacklers at Georgia. Okay? That team, especially in the latter part of last year, that Clemson offensive line and Phil Maffa was really, really good in the trenches and running the football and really imposing their will. I was really, really impressed with how well Georgia defense played, especially in the first half when they needed to because it was such a close game, right? They couldn't allow any errors, Clemson to get field position, stuff like that. That's uberly important in a game like that is field position, and they just stuffed them, right? I mean, Clemson kept at it, and I would have too because that's their strength. But Jalen Walker, especially impressed, and inside and outside, 6 tackles on the day, 1.5 sacks, led the team in that area. He'll probably lead the team and in sacks this year, the way he looked. Really impressed with Raylan Wilson, too, just a sophomore, and C.J. Allen. Same boat there, 4 tackles apiece. And we'll talk about defense a little bit more here, too, for a while. K.J. Bolden, and he made a stop. I think it was on that first drive, and he tackled Clemson's tight end, Jake Brenningstool. And that kid's like 6'6", 250. KJ came in, 190 pounds soaking wet, and he takes him down. And it's not like he's gaining yards after KJ initially hit him. I was really impressed with how, as a smaller guy, KJ Bolden throws his head in there with aggressiveness, like he is a bigger guy, plays much bigger. And I think you look at future here, SEC ball, tackling these huge running backs, very talented receivers who are not only shifty but also very large and could win one-on-one balls and run through tacklers. Having a guy like that as a true freshman in KJ Bolden, I think was very impressive to me. I think you look at that back end, we had some questions there. We'll move on from the defensive line and kind of answer some questions. In that secondary, mentioning KJ Bolden, okay, you lose Javon Bullard, you lose Tyke Smith. What are you going to do? We saw Malachi Starks in some star position. All right, Dan Jackson was on the field a lot, right? Ja'Cory Thomas came in at the end. I think those guys played really well, and they were really supported by lockdown corners and Dalen Everett, right? And Dalen Everett, Dalen Everett for me, he got a lot of flack last year, and corners do that, right? Corners get some flack because they're going to allow completions here and there. They're going to allow touchdowns here and there. But I think he played really well, especially. And Julian Humphrey, in really his first season as a starter, coming in, almost transferred, got him back. I think he's athletically so talented, but he needs snaps. He needs reps here in game, especially if they moved into the SEC schedule with some, we all know it, the SEC matchups, Ole Miss, Texas, Bama. Got to get ready for those guys because those guys and the receiver cores that those teams have are much, much better than what we saw today at Clemson. Now, I think that will kind of overplay a little bit, maybe this game from that standpoint because of the Clemson's receiver talent, and they couldn't get separation on Georgia's corners. But if you do it well, you gotta shout them out, right? So I'm not gonna pass over that just because Clemson doesn't have much receiver depth there. So have some freshman guys that really could take off in the latter part of the season, but we didn't see them today do anything. I really think we'll go back to answering some questions here for Georgia's offense and how they played that first half. And I know that Mike Bobo wasn't exactly in his bag there, but I think what really stood out to me was Carson Beck not taking bait, if that makes sense. So basically, Clemson was playing soft in the back end, right? They were getting pretty good pressure with their front four, and we talked about those guys and Peter Woods and T.J. Parker, Barrett Carter at linebacker. They're really, really good, really good front seven. That's why I think Clemson's going to go on and win the ACC championship, right? But having those guys get pressure and dropping into coverage, most of everything downfield was covered for Carson Beck and company. And instead of like a younger quarterback would do, or we've seen some frantic quarterbacks like Kate Klubnik, if you're a Clemson fan, unfortunately is one of those guys who are baited in and making those throws into double coverage. Or even single coverage that the guy's playing underneath and you don't see it to the last second, and that's a pick, right? Georgia didn't shoot themselves in the foot there. Carson Beck was like, hey, I'll let Brett Thorson punt all day, give us field position, and let our defense work, and then eventually we're going to start to move the ball. And that's exactly what happened. I tweeted it earlier. It was like he's not taking the bait. And I think that's one thing that points to Carson Beck's really football IQ, but beyond that, leadership, right? Accountability, like, no, I got this, guys. We're not gonna. They're trying to bait me. Everything was covered. That's why you thought you saw throat. Sorry, I'm tongue tied. I'm on so much caffeine, boys and girls. It's Georgia game day. You saw Carson Beck really hit the underneath passes a lot, right? 4 or 5, 6 yard dunks here in the first half because that's what the defense was giving him. So I really respect that out of Carson Beck. And it was a different story in the second half, right? Because Georgia started doing some things on the outside in the perimeter that really forced Clemson to change things up. And then Carson Beck was let loose, I feel like, right? The receiver play was a lot better in the second half as well as far as down the field. I think offensively, and we'll touch on this injuries first before we get into offensive breakdown here a little bit. So we saw Dylan Bell go out, reported cramps. So and when I saw that, I was like, well, experience and depth wise at receiver, Georgia really needs that, right? So losing him, I think it was a big hit for a second. So I'm glad it was just cramps, which makes sense. First game of the season, it feels like every time guys go into a first game of the season, game shape's different. Game shape's different, right? You have to get into that. So cramps, went to the locker room, probably get an IV, I would think. But he's going to be okay, which is good news. But I think, Arian Smith will surprise me today because we hadn't really talked about him, right? We talked about Dylan Bell. We talked about Dominic Lovett, who played really well today as well, I think. We talked about Colby Young, who's an absolute red zone mismatch. Right? First touchdown of the season for the Dogs goes to him. Great pass on that corner route. And Colby Young, he's so long, right? He's a tight end body. If you're one-on-one with him, unless you're a 6'2" corner with links yourself, I mean, they don't make many of those, right? And most of those go to the NFL for a reason. It's going to be so hard to really cover that guy. So I think that's really good for Georgia. You have to get him in the right spots early downs, though. I think that's something that'll build as he gets experience and really cohesiveness in this Georgia offense. It's going to build moving forward for him, and Georgia will really benefit from that. But right now, red zone, third down, Colby Young, I think, is a threat there, especially. London Humphreys, right? 40-yard touchdown. I feel like London was kind of there when Georgia needed him, right? A couple first down catches, that touchdown run that showed his track speed. Now go back when you watch that replay again, and this is my favorite part of that play. If you're a Georgia fan or you're on the team, you want to see this from this guy who's really unproven, transfers from Vanderbilt, he's just a sophomore. So right, you don't have the big product to look at and say, how does this guy respond in this really big time game, top 15 opponent, right, to open the season on a new team? And he takes that, obviously shows off the track speed, but at the end of the play, he wants the end zone so much that he goes shoulder into an oncoming defensive back trying to keep him out. And I think that was really good toughness from him, who's not a big guy. So I love that mindset from London Humphreys. I think he was really reliable today. We talked about Young. Cass Jones, baby. Cass Jones. I know everybody's a fan of Cass Jones, former walk-on, right? Everybody's kind of been – he's unheralded, especially nationally, right? I mean, when you have a stable of backs that that are blue chip, really coming into Georgia and 4 and 5 stars, right? These guys get all the hype, they get all the recruiting coverage. And get a guy like Cass Jones, who's probably played primarily on special teams his whole career, a few snaps here at running back in garbage time, and then comes into a position where Georgia did not have Trevor Etienne or Roderick Robinson, and he has to play. And he plays well, and he gets rewarded for his effort by scoring that touchdown. And that was incredible balance by Cass Jones. And we heard from Kirby Smart, like, hey, this dude makes plays in practice, right? This dude has ability. And we saw it on that touchdown run. I was really, really happy for him. It's a great story, and I'm all here for the great stories. That's what college football brings us, guys. You don't see walk-ons in the NFL. You don't see those kind of stories. I mean, 7th round pick, kind of similar, but we're talking about a guy who didn't get offers coming out. And he's like, no, I'm going to walk on at Georgia and try to make my place, and worked his way up where he's playing in a meaningful snaps in a meaningful game. And Kirby Smart really gave him credit after the game, saying, hey, he's blocked his tail off, right, to earn this opportunity. And Nate Frazier wasn't in the ball game on 3rd down trying to block for Carson Beck. They put Cass Jones in there, right, because he's good at it. He knows where to be, and they can trust him. And also his receiving ability is really, really something that Georgia used well in this game as well. So something to keep an eye out. Nate Frazier, and I think this is especially potent when you think about getting Trevor Etienne back, who's an all-around back himself, and having Nate Frazier. And I think just think about the confidence that he built today. As a guy who joined the team this summer, he gets called on, and he makes Clemson's defense pay, and that's one of the best front sevens in college football. I know you're like, JC, it's 34-3, man. Well, Georgia's Georgia. They won 40 straight regular season games for a reason. All right, but I still think they go on to play really well. And Nate Frazier really surprised everybody today. And if you called that, good on you, because I didn't see it coming like this. I didn't see what 85 yards he totaled. Let me get this number. Where is it at? Come here. Where is it at? 83 yards, 11 attempts. That's a 7.5 average. I know he broke a long one off of 40. I thought he was going to score there for a second. Just straight speed. I love that for Georgia and him getting his confidence in. Brett Thorson, I got to shout out special teams, boys and girls. Brett Thorson, 192 yards, 48 average, 57 long, 3 inside the 20, and 2 punts of 50 or longer. He's a weapon. I know we don't get to see him much, and Georgia has still yet to allow a single punt return, which is just an incredible stat. They didn't allow one at all last year. So he's absolutely in a defensive battle like that first half. That's when that weapon comes out, and you're like, okay, Georgia has a big time weapon right here that we never really get to see. And we didn't see much of him in the second half for sure. Now I want to touch on this, and I was asking myself this towards the end of the game, like, if Carson Beck performs like this every game, can he win the Heisman? Because it's not, it's not a 400-yard, 4-touchdown day like probably Nico at Tennessee is going to be having because of how they run that offense. But 23 of 33, 70% completions for 278 yards, 2 touchdowns, a rating of 160. You give him, if he does that every game, more or less right in there, and I think he'll have a couple of games that he'll be called upon more to pass, just about what the defense gives him. So he might eclipse that at times. And the way he showed decision-making now, especially in the first half when it was a close game and there was a lot of pressure, and how he still protected the ball really, really well, I don't think he's going to throw many picks. And he didn't last year either. So you can consider that. I think Carson Beck definitely can win the Heisman if he keeps performing just like today, right? Protect the football. Georgia wins, which is a big, big proponent of this, because think about it. It's not an RG3 type of Heisman situation for him. AP number 1 team, already tabbed the best quarterback in college football entering the season, right? Already getting NFL draft talk as the number 1 overall pick to the Giants, which is not a good place for him. So consider that, and I think Heisman voters really take that in consideration as too, maybe subconsciously. It's like, well, he already had these expectations. Did he exceed them? Is kind of my thought on the matter. But I think if he has these games continuously throughout the season, he's going to be right up there. He's definitely going to make the trip to New York, and we'll see what happens. I think overall, let's think about it as, what did you want Georgia to look like in this game, and what did they? I think they definitely exceeded my expectations. And jump in the comments. Tell me what you think, guys. I'm solo today. So jump in there. Give me something to work with. Already, like I said, he's currently moderating the presidential election. He's getting ready to moderate the presidential debate here in a couple of weeks. So he couldn't be here. He's a history major. He's a history guy, so he's able to be here. But I think, at least from my standpoint, on did Georgia look how I wanted it to? I think they exceeded my expectations, because I thought it was going to be a 30-13 game. I didn't think the defense was going to play that well, right? I expected a little bit of improvement from Klubnik last year to this year. Now, this could be very well just because Georgia is that good on defense, right? And we have one sample size of this Georgia defense this season. Ask me in week 5, and we're going to have a lot more information to work with. So I think in that standpoint, Georgia is rolling. I think there's a lot of confidence built within this team. I think Kirby Smart and staff know a lot about certain players they didn't know about before. Can he do it? Like Nate Frazier, they saw him in practice. Can he do it on the field? Can he do it when we need him? And he definitely did. They protected the football. And that's one thing we haven't touched on much. They protected the football, which is absolutely huge. Think about these games coming up on the road, at Alabama, at Ole Miss, at Texas. You cannot shoot yourself in the foot, right? Think about last year, when Georgia got into those games against Auburn, at Auburn, Carolina, right? Down at halftime. SEC championship game, shoot yourself in the foot, fumble in your own territory, end up being a 3-point loss, and you get kicked out of the playoff. That's how you have to beat Georgia in this Kirby Smart era at the height of it, really, right? And they didn't make those mistakes today, which for a season opener, I expected some early mistakes, and there were some miscues, absolutely, in this game from the entire team, really. missed assignments here and there. Offensive line, blocking wise, I think was really shaky early. But I mean, that's against a very good defensive front who the adrenaline of a season opener and really, really talented guys in themselves. I think just needed to settle in a little bit, right? Because you had some new players. You had Jarrell Wilson in at center, right? He's a first year starter. So I think once they get these guys cohesive, I think this is going to be business as usual as far as consistent execution for this team. That's just what I see. We'll have to, games have to be played on the field, right? So I think moving forward, something to watch out for. Carson Beck, his decision making really stood out to me. Keep an eye on that and just let me know what you think, because I think that's so important for this team to go to the national championship and get their third national title in the next 4 years, which is what all of y'all want and is what those players and coaches want as well. They might not tell you because they're going to tell you one game at a time. They're going to tell you, we have to win the next game. So they're not going to say it, but we know it, right? And the talent there that Georgia has, that's nationally, that's all. They're going to be under the microscope all year nationally, right? One mistake and they're going to be making headlines. So that's the kind of pressure they're dealing with. But I think something to take home with you and think about this next week is, what do you want to see from the young players against Tennessee Tech in Athens, September 7th, just this next week, 2 p.m. kickoff. Hopefully Georgia weather doesn't give you a 95 degree scorcher for that one, because you're going to get burnt if you're like me. That's for sure. You'll be like a lobster after that game. What do you want to see from these young players? Because this is going to be a really, really big opportunity for some of those guys we just mentioned to get even more snaps and get these kind of veterans off the field a little bit. In KJ Bolden and Nate Frazier on offense, offensive linemen, as far as Monroe Freeling, he got taken advantage of a little bit here and there today. Get him in there and more of a snap to snap role where he's not rotating as much. I think that's going to be big for him and his development. Micah Morris, get him in more at guard. Receiver wise, get Sokobe White, Nitro Tuggle in there. Get London Humphreys more snaps and Colby Young. Try to really maximize Tennessee Tech, and then coming to Athens and then paying them probably millions of dollars, maybe $1 million to $2 million. I don't know. We'll guess on that. And get them in there and let them play and build some confidence, because the schedule after Tennessee Tech gets a little shaky, right? You go on the road to Kentucky, Brock Vandegrift, Damon Dumas-Johnson, right? What secrets are they telling the Kentucky staff to take advantage of Georgia's offense? All right, they played with Beck. They played against Beck. That's going to be a tough game. And then you got straight to Alabama and Auburn, right? And Auburn's going to be much improved this year. That's not a hot take. Look at the talent Hugh Freeze has brought in. Look at his track record as a head coach. Going to be much better this year. So after Tennessee Tech, this schedule gets a little interesting. All right, and then it gets really interesting, obviously, there in the middle part with Texas, Ole Miss, and Bama. So I think this game is that builder game. Okay, defensive line wise, I'll absolutely get those young guys in, especially at outside linebacker too. Get Mpemba in there, get him some snaps. I think that is one thing to watch, is the depth at outside linebacker. I think that's something that really could come into play in that really, really tough stretch of Georgia's schedule, right? When guys are going to get banged up, right? And Michael Williams, he went out with an ankle there for a minute. We don't know how serious that is. So I think that's really important here next week to get these guys in and get them some snaps, man. So let's end it there. I don't want to keep you guys too long. All right. We got a lot of good college football on today. I'm going to keep covering nationally for Athlon Sports. Thank you so much for watching on X, Facebook, and YouTube. UGA Football Live with JC Shelton. Really our first live recap of the season. We'll be back doing these each week. We also have live shows on Mondays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can watch just like you're watching right now, or listen wherever you get your podcast. We appreciate it, everyone, for joining in. Give me a like, give me a subscribe, and next time jump in the comments and give me some stuff to talk with you about. Love to answer some questions and give you my take on things if you'd like. Thanks for everyone. Have a great day.